Hello and welcome to Coronavirus Catch Up. I'm Jordan Kenny. We're live on the BBC News NI website and Facebook page and on the BBC iPlayer for the next 20 minutes or so. Thanks for tuning in, however you're joining us. Now, just earlier this afternoon, we heard from the First and Deputy First Ministers at their latest Stormont press briefing. They confirmed that schools will remain shut, meaning that for most pupils, the earliest they will be able to return to classrooms is the 8th of March. And that, of course, will depend on how well we're coping with the virus at that point. Schools haven't been back since before the Christmas break, so this means some pupils will have been out of classrooms for months when they finally return. There's a lot of people with a lot of questions about how this will affect them, so to answer those questions and go through it all with us now tonight is our Education Correspondent, Robbie Meredith. Robbie, how's things?
Fine, Jordan. Busy, as you can imagine. I'm sure they're busy for you too.
Yeah, definitely are. Firstly, Robbie, talk us through what was announced today. Like I said, schools are going to remain shut for now. What does that mean for their staff and pupils?
Well, basically, it means that around 90% of pupils who are currently learning remotely are going to keep learning remote until the 5th of March. The plan is to try and get pupils back to school on the 8th of March. So that'll mean effectively most pupils will have spent 2 months out of school at the start of this year, which is quite a long time. Now, some pupils are allowed to go into school. Vulnerable children, the children of key workers, special schools stay open. So about 9% of all of our pupils are going in. But of course, the rest are learning remotely. It's fair to say that is working better, it seems, if you listen to some teachers and pupils, than it did in the first lockdown last year. Schools are much better prepared this year, I think, but there are still massive problems, and any principal and teacher will tell you that learning remotely is not the same either for teachers or pupils as actually being face-to-face in a classroom. So I think the hope is that the public health situation improves a lot during February. We all hope that's the case, because that would allow, I think, some pupils at least to get back in school on the 8th of March. The executive's going to look again at the arrangements for schools in mid-February. So at the minute what we have is a target date to get some pupils back into class, and obviously we hope that the public situation improves enough for that to happen on the 8th of March.
So the 8th of March is that target date that we're working towards. And I should say, if you're watching tonight on Facebook, feel free to get involved in the comments section as well. I've got my iPad here so I can see all the Facebook comments coming in. So if you have any questions or thoughts about what's being discussed, leave them in there and we'll try and get to them before we finish tonight. Robbie, we've had lots of questions sent in for you tonight. However, there's one that kept coming up time and time again when we were going through the questions that were sent in earlier. And it's asking, has there been any consideration given to just delaying this school year and starting fresh again in September, when hopefully we're in a better situation with the virus? Sarah got in touch. She points out that some students have only been in school for about 3 months so far of this academic year.
It has been discussed, Jordan. It came up actually at an Education Committee hearing earlier this week at Stormont, and I know that there's a few principals have suggested the idea, but I think personally, and I'm not going in anything I've heard, I think it would be hugely difficult, because don't forget, you have 330,000 pupils in Northern Ireland schools. You have pupils who would be expecting to start primary 1 in September. You have pupils who would be expecting this summer to transfer from primary school to post-primary school. You'd have 18-year-olds in upper 6th or year 14 who would be expecting to leave school in June. So effectively, you would have to change arrangements for all those pupils. You would have to delay pupils moving up a year. And this would affect, as I say, hundreds of thousands of pupils across Northern Ireland. It would mean extra pupils going into primary schools in P1, going into post-primary schools in year 8. It is just hugely difficult to see how you could take a decision like that. I know there might be some advantages to it for pupils, given, as you've said, the disruption that some pupils have faced. But I think that would be really the nuclear option. And I can't, although some people might feel it's a good idea, at the minute, I don't think that's something that is being seriously discussed.
So as it stands, schools won't be open before the 8th of March, but that still is to be reviewed nearer the time. Emma, she wants to cut to the chase. She's asking up front, is there any likelihood this will go on even further past the 8th of March and that schools won't be back even before Easter?
Unfortunately, that's possible. It'll depend on the wider public health situation. I mean, both the Education Minister and The executive have made that clear. They're going to look again at the 8th of March date on the 18th of February and try and come up with a decision then, depending on how the wider public health situation is looking. And even the 8th of March date, I suppose, it's a target date. Even if that's achievable, it may not be for all pupils. There's talk if they can get pupils back in exam years, those facing GCSE, AS and A-level at that date, that might be a way that they'll look at getting some pupils back before Easter. But it's all dependent on the wider public health situation. I suppose at least we have a target date now to work towards. But of course, the 8th of March is 5 weeks away. A lot could change in that time. We hope it changes for the better to allow some pupils to get back. But you're right, some pupils may not be back until after the Easter holidays if things don't go as planned. Easter's quite early this year. I think Easter Sunday is the 4th of April. So schools would be due to come back in kind of the second week of April anyway. So it might be that some pupils don't come back until then, but we hope that that's not the case.
Hopefully not. Christina has been in touch. She's asking if there's been any discussion yet about what will happen next year for students in year 11. So that's those in the first year of their GCSEs at the minute. Obviously, we know GCSEs and A-levels have been cancelled for this year, but she's asking about the situation for those who have missed in-school lessons this year. So would there be any changes made next year to reflect that?
I think there'll have to be changes. I mean, obviously the summer exams have been cancelled this year, but pupils are taking GCSE, AS and A-level are still going to be awarded their grades. Now, we're not quite sure how that's going to happen. It's likely to be quite similar to last year in that schools will have a big say on what pupils get. But of course, pupils who are in year 11 at the minute or year 13 will be potentially exams next year, next summer. And I think what will happen is they will aim to get exams, GCSE, AS and A-level exams sat in the summer of 2022. But the problem might well be that, they'll have to reduce exam papers, reduce what pupils are examined on. They were planning to do that this year, take out some of the content of exams. For instance, they knew that there were some parts of some courses pupils wouldn't have studied. So they were going to reduce how many exams pupils were going to take. Instead, they've cancelled them totally. I think next year in summer 2022, for those pupils in year 11 and year 13, they will have to reduce the number of exams people take, and also take into account that pupils may not have taken all of their GCSE or A-level course.
Okay, so this one in from Maggie, Robbie, slightly different topic. She's asking about the prospect of early vaccination for teachers and other school staff. Is there anything you can tell us about that? Has there anything been said? Oh, we've maybe lost Robbie there. His connection seems to have cut out, but just while we're waiting on Robbie to come back, we'll look at some of the figures that have been released today in relation to coronavirus. So the Department of Health today recorded a further 13 coronavirus-related deaths in Northern Ireland. The total number of people in Northern Ireland who have died after testing positive for the virus now stands at 1,792. Also in the past 24 hours, a further 592 positive cases of COVID-19 were confirmed in Northern Ireland, and there are now 768 people being treated in hospital for COVID-19. 67 of them are in intensive care and 57 patients are receiving ventilation. According to Arlene Foster, speaking earlier today, Northern Ireland's R number, or the rate of infection of the virus, was continuing to fall. The rate in the community is currently sitting between 0.65 and 0.8. But she did warn that the number of COVID patients in intensive care units has doubled over the past month, reaching its highest ever level this week. Turning to vaccines, looking at vaccines now, a total of 175,284 people in Northern Ireland have now received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Michelle O'Neill said she was encouraged by the progress made in the vaccination programme earlier today at the Stormont press conference that was held in Dungannon. Now, we don't seem to have Robbie back yet. We'll keep trying, but when we get him back, we'll be talking about more things to do with education, but we'll be back in a few minutes when we have Robbie back with us. Back on.
Hello,
You hear me
sorry,
okay?
George. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
There we go. Technical difficulties. This is the beauty of broadcasting, during a pandemic. One of us is at home, one of us is in the office. You never know what's going to happen. So it's a bit of excitement for the broadcast.
I think it's probably my dodgy Wi-Fi router, actually, Jordan, at home. So.
Well, we're back now, and that's the main thing. But we were talking there, Robbie, about the prospect of early vaccination for teachers and other school staff. I don't know if we got the end of your question or the end of your answer there, but just to go over that again, what can you tell us about the prospect of early vaccination for teachers and other school staff?
Well, it was discussed by the executive today, Jordan, especially for special school teachers, because remember, special schools remain open. So for special schools teachers and staff, there was a proposal from the DUP Education Minister, Peter Weir, that they would be moved up the priority vaccination list. I guess the difficulty is that the vaccination, I suppose that the order for vaccinations is set by the UK-wide Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation. Now, they advise health departments right across the UK, so the executive would have to take a decision to, I suppose, move certain groups of people up the priority list. So although that was discussed today for special school teachers and special school staff, no decision was reached. And in the Assembly earlier this week, to vaccinate those staff early was backed by all MLAs from all parties, but obviously there was a bit of discussion on that at the executive. No agreement was reached. There's also been a call to vaccinate teachers more widely to get children back in school, but as I say, the executive again would have to approve that, and no decision has been taken on that yet. So I'm afraid, although that's been discussed a lot, we can't offer any clarity on that yet.
Well, quite a few people have got in touch with us on this, Robbie. They want to know how this extended closure will affect the AQE exams next year. So we heard there about GCSEs and A levels, but what can you tell us about the AQE exams?
Well, not a lot at the minute. I mean, obviously we know that AQE transfer tests and the transfer tests which are run by the PPTC have been cancelled this year. So grammar schools, all post-primary schools, but grammar schools especially, are having to look at different admissions criteria this year because they can't use a test. There has been no decision taken about the transfer tests that are scheduled for the autumn. Again, I guess it's dependent on the public health situation. The hope would be, obviously, by the autumn, things would be a lot better than now, that all children would be back in school, so therefore perhaps those tests would be able to go ahead. But there'll already be concern, I think, from some teachers, parents and schools about the amount of disruption that pupils who are currently in primary 6 have faced in their education. We now know they're going to be out of school at least until March. So that's 2 months disruption. So I think there already will be questions about whether those pupils really can expect to sit a transfer test next year. Now, whether you like it or not, obviously it creates a lot of debate. Some people are very opposed to academic selection, others are quite pro it. There must be a question around, if those primary 6 pupils spend quite a lot of time out of school, again, whether a test would be fair in the autumn for them to sit to transfer onto either, selective or non-selective schools. No clarity yet, but I think that will become a talking point, Jordan, if those primary 6 pupils do spend more time out of school.
Definitely. Well, working from home, Robbie, is something that a lot of us have had to get used to during the pandemic. I mean, I bet you never thought you'd be doing a live broadcast from your stairs, but school students are no different. They've been working from home. But on the topic of online learning, we've had questions in from a few different people asking about the differences in approaches being taken across schools. Has there been any guidance published or made available to schools even on how online learning should be taking place? To make it as fair as possible across the board?
There has been guidance which has been put out by the department and by the Education Authority on online learning, and the Department of Education, I think, realised that last year there was a big problem, especially with digital poverty. So there have been quite a lot of laptops distributed through schools. There have been Wi-Fi vouchers purchased by the department to enable, because obviously data costs will be a big issue for some families, to enable kind of pupils to have Wi-Fi access when they're working from home. And I think if you talk to schools, many post-primary schools especially, feel they are better set up for remote learning this time round, that they've been able to teach pupils quite successfully. So I think things have improved when it comes to online learning, Jordan, but there will still be huge problems, and that'll be down sometimes to lack of devices, poor broadband, the kind of thing we've been suffering from tonight, a wee bit of Wi-Fi failure at my end, poor broadband, the fact that obviously some pupils just find it very difficult, understandably, to sit in front of a screen for a number of hours a day and learn. So I think all those problems are there. They're not as big as they were last year, but I think there would be concern, obviously, and I think this has been expressed, that the longer we have remote learning, the more pupils who are perhaps disadvantaged or disengaged when it comes to remote learning, the further behind that they will fall. So I think it's better than it was last year, but there are still huge issues. And I think there is there would be an enthusiasm to get pupils back in class learning face-to-face as soon as possible when it's safe to do so.
Now, Tim and Colin have both got in touch with the same question. Now, I don't know how popular this solution would be. It wasn't that long ago that I was at school, and I know how, precious your school holidays, your summer holidays are. But has any consideration been given, Robbie, to schools going back during the summer months, if the situation is better then, to make up for the time lost in classrooms?
I haven't heard that discussed yet, Jordan. I think there would be a huge... some parents might be quite keen in that, and I think, of course, there might be an argument in terms of the disruption that the children have faced, maybe trying to give them a bit of extra class time over the summer. There were some last year, some summer schools held to try and help disadvantaged, children who'd been particularly disadvantaged educationally by the lockdown and from March to June catch up. Some schools actually did open for a week or two over the summer. I was up at in West Belfast at a school that opened for some children over the summer to help them catch up a bit. But I think that kind of thing might happen again this summer, but I don't think there'll be any widespread move to actually extend, say, all schools opening until mid-July or late July or whatever. I think teaching unions, for instance, might have an issue with that. So we might see some schools open for a week or two over the summer to help some pupils catch up like they did last year, but I don't think there'll be all-round kind of opening of schools during the summer.
Just before we finish, Robbie, I wanted to move away from schools and talk briefly about universities and further education colleges. Where have they been left as a result of all this?
Yeah, it's kind of been overlooked a bit, I suppose. I mean, partly that's because the new university term has really just started. Obviously, they don't go back. Effectively, their new semester doesn't start until late January, so it's really only started around now. I think, again, for them, things seemed to settle down towards the end of last year in university terms. Most students are learning remotely in front of a laptop, apart from in those subjects like medicine or dentistry or even some of the, engineering or music, where you just can't do a degree in those subjects and some others without some element of face-to-face teaching. But if anybody's been past Queen's or Ulster University lately, they'll know the number of students on campus is minimal compared to what would normally be the case. And remote learning seems to be going okay, although of course there are issues for students at universities around things like paying rent on houses living in if they're not actually living on campus, and there are also issues around remote learning. Again, we shouldn't assume that every student has a fantastic laptop and can connect easily. When it comes to further education, the situation is quite similar. Most students will be learning remotely. Again, that has its challenges for them too. There's also additional problems, I think, faced by students in further education who are taking BTECs. They know that their BTEC exams later this year have been cancelled, but again, BTECs tend to be quite practical and vocational subjects. They're not quite sure how they're going to be assessed. So while students in further education and university are mainly learning remotely, doing their degrees, doing the further education qualifications online, there are still a lot of uncertainties for students there too.
Well, we could talk a lot more about this, Robbie. There's so much to go through. However, we're out of time tonight. I will let you get off your stairs and go and get your dinner. But thanks for coming on and explaining all that to us and answering those questions. Thanks as well to everyone who got in touch with their questions and sending them in. We didn't have time to get back to all of you, but hopefully the questions that we've answered tonight will have explained what's going on this week to you. Sorry for the technical issues that we had slightly earlier on, but That's like I said, that's the fun of broadcasting during a pandemic. One of us is at home, one of us is in the office. You never know what's going to happen. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with all the latest on the pandemic on the BBC News NI website, which you'll find at bbc.co.uk/newsni. We're on social media too. Chances are, if you're watching this on Facebook, you've probably found our Facebook page, but we're on Instagram, Twitter and YouTube as well. Just type in BBC News NI and you'll find us on there. But that's it from us on Coronavirus Catch Up for this week. We'll be back again next week, but until then, stay safe.